What's up, guys? Welcome to the archery shop. Turkey seasons are right around the corner, and so we're going to dive into our full-blown turkey setup from a bow standpoint, from what we do in the field to be successful, and all the way down to executing the shot when that moment counts the most. First things first, when it comes to archery hunting turkeys, is picking your bow. And I have a couple different bows here. I usually set up 2 different bows just because of the Garmin site that we use and the different legalities of different states that I hunt. And I know I'm going to be hunting Colorado this year. I also like to set up 2 different bows for something I'll talk about a little bit later. But one thing that I always talk about when it comes to the archery setup is with big game, obviously you're concerned about penetration, you're concerned about pulling as much pounds as you can comfortably. With turkey hunting, that's not the case. You don't need to worry about that penetration. And so if you have a 60, 70 pound bow and you can't draw it back real smooth at 70 pounds, I have no problem with dialing that back to 60 or 65, whatever the case may be, or having a separate bow, like I said, to set up for a lower poundage. And I'll dive into that when I talk about broadheads. But I'm gonna be shooting the Proven 34 with the Garmin Zero on it for majority of my turkey hunts. I am really comfortable with that bow. I shot it all fall and it shoots really, really well. For my second setup, I'm going to be using the Virtue, and this is actually a 50 pound bow. So this is a 50 pounder, and I will use this when I hunt other states where the Garmin's not legal, but I'll also use it with a setup that I've used in the past with a guillotine broadhead. And this is just a fixed broadhead with a big cutting diameter that you shoot the turkeys with in the head. And what I like about this broadhead is that it leaves no margin for error. You either kill them or you completely miss. And it's a completely different setup. It takes some confidence building and takes a little bit of tuning to get it dialed in. But I have shot this in the past, and it's an adrenaline rush for sure, trying to get one super close, because obviously with these big wings on the front, no matter how well tuned your bow is, they don't fly great past about 25 yards. So on this one, I'm shooting the full length RIP TKO arrow with the standard 50 grain insert. And I actually went and put feather fletchings on here. So I got a 4 fletching system here with feathers just for added stability. I've shot them in the past actually with like flu arrows as well. But you want a lot of stability in the back of the arrow because this thing is going to want to fly crazy. But I've got this set up pretty dialed in. I shot a gobbler a couple years ago. It was one of the most intense moments, biggest rush that you could ask for. So while we're on the topic of arrows, it kind of goes back to talking about the weight of the bow and shooting a 70 pound bow, and you want a heavy arrow for penetration with whitetail and big game. I shoot the VAP SS during the whitetail season, and this arrow has the 95 grain insert on the front, so it's overall a pretty heavy arrow. It's around 500 grains. I really like that for the big game setup, but for turkeys you don't really need that. You don't need the super heavy arrow, the extra kinetic energy, and with that you get more arrow drop. And so what I do for turkey season, I like to switch to the RIP TKO, which is the same shaft that I use for that guillotine broadhead. And this arrow is only about 420 grains total weight. I have the standard 50 grain insert on the end, 100 grain broadhead, and you're getting a flatter trajectory with this. And it just allows you a little bit more margin of error, because everybody knows when it comes to killing a turkey with a bow, you'll take everything that you can get. So that's the difference in arrow setup. Diving into broadheads, I tell people all the time, with turkeys you want the biggest expandable broadhead that you can shoot. So we're shooting the Mega Meat, same broadhead I shoot for whitetails, but I also am interested in trying out the new G5 T2 that just came out. It's a 2-blade, 2-inch cutting diameter broadhead. And so it does a lot of damage as well. So between the bow, dialing back the weight, shooting maybe a lighter arrow, the Garmin Zero sight is another huge asset when it comes to the turkey hunting, because it gives you 1 dot for the exact distance. So if you get a bird that hangs up a little bit and he's 35 yards, you get a single pin for 35 yards. You're not gapping your 30 and 40, and precision counts when it comes to turkeys. So once you got your setup all dialed in, obviously the next thing is practice, and practice makes perfect when it comes to archery. You need to be comfortable, confident in your shot. And when it comes to turkeys, beyond just shooting in the yard, I like to shoot from our turkey lounger. That's been like a saving grace when it comes to turkey hunting and being comfortable, being low to the ground. We don't hunt out of ground blinds very often at all, so we're just sitting on the ground, natural ground blind, grabbing whatever we have around us to throw up there. And the turkey lounger allows you to sit basically flat on the ground but be extremely comfortable. We've taken plenty of naps in the turkey loungers over the years, so I like to practice in those situations, in those scenarios. The other thing I didn't talk about with the bow setup a ton is our bow ready bow stand that actually holds the bow vertically ready to go right in front of you. So when I set up, I like to set up the bow right in front of me where I can draw my bow without having to move left or right at all. I can just fully extend and draw my bow. And so that bow, the bow ready stand, has the bow in the ready position, ready to go. And practicing that stuff from that position will just make sure there's no hidden things that pop up. You make sure you can anchor while you're seated down. Another big thing that I see all the time is people putting their bow in front of them and drawing between their two legs like this, which is not the natural way that you would ever shoot a bow. Obviously you want the bow over here on this side of your body. So I kick my legs over here to the right and you have them perpendicular to each other. So when you do draw the bow, you just pull straight back. You're not swinging or fighting your body. If you're trying to draw your bow with your arm inside of your chest here, it is extremely, extremely difficult. And so I always like to have it to the left, legs on this side, be able to come to full draw nice and easy. So the more you practice that and put yourself in those scenarios, then the more efficient you will be when the time comes. To dive into our field setup, first things first, obviously, is decoy selection. And picking a decoy can be based off of a lot of different things. And I, always like to base it off of what I'm seeing in the field, how birds are interacting. It's unbelievable to see the pecking order evolve throughout the season. Obviously, earlier seasons, they've been more grouped up. Later in the year, they break up. The more dominant birds kind of push off some of the subordinate birds. So really, it's like anything. You just kind of try one thing and you learn in the field and you go to the next. But I primarily like to use a strutting decoy, whether it's a strutter or a strutting jake, starting out. Obviously we use the 3/4 strut submissive jake paired with some hens, but there's been situations in early season when we put out a mini flock of decoys. So we switch it up all the time. One of the big things is if I'm hunting a specific bird that I've hunted before and I've given him one of the looks, I like to switch up the look, maybe move our setup a little bit, put a little bit different decoy setup out there, and that way he hasn't seen that exact setup. So the next thing is really placing those decoys and how far do you want to place them. I like to place them pretty close. If you're about 20 yards, 15, I like them nice and tight, less margin for error. 20 is always nice. If you're not using the Garmin, you have a fixed pin for exactly 20 yards. So if they commit to the decoy, they're right there. And then beyond the actual distance of the decoys, I try to face the gobbler decoy or the jake decoy away from where I'm expecting the birds to come from, because that seems to trigger some emotion in them when a strutter comes out in the field, starts strutting around, and the decoy is not acknowledging their presence, and it'll make them mad. And as of lately, the past several years, we've been using the motion Strutting 360 motion stake system, where you can actually remote spin the decoy and turn it, and that can be awesome if you get a bird that's really, really shy to the decoys, hesitant to come in, or maybe it's a subordinate bird. You turn that decoy a little bit, turn it towards him, and then turn it away from him, and that might flip the switch entirely. So that's one thing that is consistent with these birds, is that nothing is the same ever, and their little attitudes and demeanors can change. So having all that motion can definitely help in those situations. So I like to keep the decoys close, and if you can add motion, that's an added bonus.
Midwest Land Group has changed the way land is sold and is the only brokerage to offer a 100% satisfaction guarantee. If you're looking to buy or sell property, don't before you talk to us.
When it comes to calling, much like the decoy situation, it really is, based off of what you're observing and seeing. And I always like to err on the side of less calling. It depends on the time of the year. A lot of times you get on a roost and it might be hot and then, the birds are going nuts. Well, then you can be a little more aggressive in your calling. But we've also hunted birds that are pressured and that gobble a couple of times on the roost, fly down, and are tight-lipped. So it really depends on the bird, their demeanor, how they're acting. But these are kind of 4 calls that I don't go to the field without. First off is a locator call. So starting in the morning when you're trying to locate birds on a roost, if you didn't roost them the night before, I love having this hoot tube. It sounds super realistic and gets birds to gobble. And a lot of times, depending on where you're hunting, it seems like different species of birds gobble different, earlier than others. Like, we're hunting in Kansas, they'll gobble an hour and a half before daylight, which is great because it takes us a while to set up. But this is how we're locating them first thing in the morning. And then later in the morning, I like to switch to a crow call. And it just seems to really, really trick them more later in the morning. Although it all depends with every turkey, and like certain sounds, make them gobble better than others. So I've had gobblers like late morning gobble to the owl call that won't gobble to the crow call. So it just depends. But when it comes to the turkey calls, I like to have a mouth call in at all times, just because I like having that diaphragm ready to go. I hands free, can call birds close, can have my bow, my hand in my bow clipped onto the release if I need to, and can still call as that bird's, making that final approach. But for the majority of the time, I prefer to use a slate or a glass call. I just like the way they sound. I'm able to really manipulate this call much better than I can a diaphragm call. I'm not by any means a professional turkey caller by any means. So really what you get comfortable with, but I like to have a variety because, like I said, different birds prefer different tones different times of day. Different birds prefer different tones every day, throughout the season. Certain strikes just go well with one bird that won't go well with another. So really it's a guessing game, but you just got to figure it out and try not to overcall in the process. Quite possibly the most important part in archery turkey hunting is knowing when to draw your bow. Obviously their eyesight is unmatched, and if you're hunting without a ground blind like we are, it can make or break the hunt for sure. So it's tough to, in those moments, to just control your emotions. I mean, those birds are, gobbling right in front of you and coming in the decoy. They may be fighting the decoy, and I know my heart just will pound out of my chest. But one thing that all the years of turkey hunting has taught me is patience and wait for that right moment. And so that's one of the reasons why we like to use a male decoy, because the birds will come in aggressive and will be more susceptible to allowing us to come to full draw without spooking. So if you're shooting at a spooked bird that's running off, I mean, it's a very low percentage opportunity. So what I like to do is, as that bird's making the final approach, be ready. I get my hand on my bow, clip my D-loop on, and I'm just a statue. And I sit there and just wait and wait and wait until that bird will strut away from me, blocking his head with his tail fan, and I'll rip that bow back as fast as I can if it's way blocked. There's been situations, of course, over the years where that bird just doesn't want to turn, and it may go on for a minute and a half, and you're thinking, all right, I'm going to miss my opportunity. He's going to lose interest and leave. And judging by the bird's demeanor, a lot of times they're so angry you can get away with drawing the bow back. And so in those situations, I just bring it back as slow and smooth as possible, as to not tip him off. So getting to full draw is the biggest challenge in archery hunting, especially without a blind. Even if you're running ground blind, a lot of your movement is concealed, but still that bow is up towards the front of the window of the blind, and so they can catch movement, and that can ruin your hunt in a heartbeat. So I know that when I'm on a hunt and I finally get that bow at full draw, it's like my whole body just relaxes, and I'm like, all right, like, you did it, now finish the job. And so that ties into shot placement and executing the shot. And turkey's vitals are tiny. I mean, they're the size of an apple, and you just can't miss. And so obviously, you can shoot them broadside, you can shoot them facing on or facing away. And I prefer, if I get the opportunity, it doesn't always work this way, but I prefer to shoot them facing away. It seems like it's a much more lethal shot. It tends to put the birds down like right away. And so if you can take that shot facing away, that's ideal. But if they're strutting, that presents a whole nother set of challenges, because those feathers are all standing up and they appear so much bigger than they are, and you think the body's this big and really it's this big. So preferably out of strut, preferably facing away. But if you're shooting the one broadside, I like to follow the leg up and then kind of draw a diagonal line from where that leg comes into the body up to the wing joint, and you want to be right in the middle of that wing joint. If you immobilize the drumsticks, the legs, or the wing joint, it's going to be a lethal shot, and you'll be able to recover that bird. And maybe more importantly than the shot placement itself is just waiting for a still bird. And it gets back to the patience thing. Just like you wait for the opportunity to draw the bow, you need to wait for a bird to be still. And if they're attacking a decoy, that can be much easier said than done. So but shooting a moving bird, they move so quick and agile that even at 20-15 yards, by the time you touch that arrow off, if they turn slightly, that can change everything. So all those things kind of relate back to just confidence and patience and waiting for the time to be right. So there you have it. We've talked about our full bow setup. We've talked about setup in the field, and we've talked about execution of the shot when the moment finally comes together. So hopefully that's some good information you guys can take with you and apply that in the field as you get out there in archery turkey hunt this spring, because seasons are going to be opening up all across the country in no time. So If you guys have not already got a Bow Ready bow stand, be sure to jump on the online store, get you one of those. That will change your life when it comes to archery turkey hunting. Whether you're hunting from a natural ground blind or even a pop-up blind, you can have that bow sitting right there, ready to go right in front of you. And another new item that we have in the shop is our Bow Ready Fletch, which is a shrink wrap fletching system that you slide onto your arrow and literally dip it in boiling water, let it dry for 10 seconds, and it's good to go. So the easiest way to fletch an arrow, and you don't have to mess with any sort of fletching jig or glue. So hopefully that is good information you guys can apply to your hunts. We have some new hunts coming out next week. New season of Full Strut. We'll be dropping new episodes every single week. And in the meantime, if you want to brush up on some turkey hunts and watch some hunts, you can actually check out how the decap head performed in the video right here. So thanks for watching, and best of luck to you guys in the field this spring.